It was the summer of my junior year when the events of the story took place. My brother and I were chilling at home, playing Super Smash Bros. Brawl, when we heard a knock on our door. I answered it to see our older brother standing at our doorstep. "Ted," I cried out. "Nice to see you, Brad. Is Harry here?" "Yeah, he and I are playing some Brawl. Care to join us?" Ted responded with a, "Fuck yeah." Then he stepped inside. While playing with him was fun, his faster reflexes and greater experience with the game meant he'd beat us 8 out of the 10 times, even when we tried to team up on him. We soon switched over to other games, Pokemon XD, Gale of Darkness, and Metroid Prime, but soon we grew bored. I figured we could pass the time by playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Or something. However, Ted suggested we should browse the deep web. "Isn't that dangerous?" I asked. "Yeah, Ted, we've heard stories about people going on there, then having their info leaked and strangers stalking their home. Our brother informed us, as long as we didn't commit the classic amateur deep web browsing mistakes, we'd be fine. He said the mistakes were not using a VPN, and not unplugging our webcam, or at least covering it up if we happened to be using a laptop, which we were. After making sure the laptop's built-in mic and webcam were covered in duct tape, we went on the deep web. For the most part, it wasn't really as exciting as we were expecting. The best thing we came across was a space shooter in which we played as a giant penis shooting sperm at spaceships. Next, we found a live stream that had a man dancing in just underwear while rubbing cream cheese on his chest, and he had clothespins attached to his nipples. Not that I want to see anyone get killed or anything like that, but is there actually anything interesting to do on here? I asked. "We can check out some more things in a bit. Right now, I'm hungry though." "Yeah, me too." As bizarre as it is to say, I think watching this guy has made me hungry for cheese. "Do you guys have any food in the kitchen?" "No, but Mom left us money if we wanted to order something," Harry said. I was about to propose ordering pizza when coincidentally, an ad for pizza popped up on the screen. It read, "Deep Web's Deep Dish Pizza." Huh? I kinda like the name. Should we click on it? "Or do you think it may be a virus?" Harry asked Ted. "It might be. Do you want to risk it?" What the hell? This is an old laptop anyway," I said. Ted clicked on the banner, which opened up a menu. On that menu were some of the most mouth-watering pizzas we've ever seen. Not only pizza, but also pasta, breadsticks, mozzarella sticks, and desserts, among other things. Hell, even the salad looked presentable for a pizza place. Above the picture was a button that said, "Order here." We talked about what we wanted for a few minutes, and eventually, we decided on a meat lover's pizza with olives, mushrooms, and stuffed crust, mozzarella sticks, apple pie pizza, and 2 big bottles of Dr. Pepper. Just as a precaution, we decided to pay in cash and make sure we put the address in as somewhere public that was close by. When we arrived at our location, which was the library down the street, we saw the delivery guy who had our order waiting by the front desk. Regular looking dude. He looked to be in his early 30s. What was odd was that he wasn't wearing a uniform or anything. He just had regular clothes on. We paid for our food. Then we went outside to eat it in Ted's car. It was fucking delicious. The meat was cooked just right, and the cheese was super stringy. We were busy trying some of the apple pie pizza and mozzarella sticks when we heard someone tap on the driver's window. We looked out to see the delivery guy holding up a bottle of Dr. Pepper. The food was so good, we didn't even notice we were missing one. He motioned for Ted to put down his window. Ted did so. Then the man apologized for forgetting and handed Ted the Dr. Pepper. "By the way, how's the pizza?" the man asked. "This stuff kicks ass. We'll have to order from you guys more often," Ted replied. "Glad you like it, but to make up for my foolish mistake earlier, how about I give you guys something extra?" "Oh, you don't have to do that," the man insisted, and eventually we caved. He ran to his car and came back with a small box. He told us it was filled with cookies, then handed it to Ted. "Well, that was nice of him," I said, as the man walked away. "Let me get a couple of those cookies." "You got it," Ted replied, opening the box. However, instead of cookies, what we saw inside looked to be some kind of smoke grenade, and it went off, sending fumes throughout the car. The fumes must have been some kind of knockout gas, because we began to feel really dizzy. The last thing I saw before passing out was the man smiling at me through the window, and unfortunately, there wasn't anyone else outside. When we woke up, we found ourselves in a musty, smelly room with a single floor lamp beaming down on us like a spotlight, but very dimly lit. We figured we must be in a basement. All three of us were tied up with rope in the middle of the floor. From out of the shadows appeared the man. The dim light of the lamp was the only thing illuminating his face. "Look who is finally awake," he exclaimed. "You crazy motherfucker, let us go," Ted demanded. "Let you go? I can't do that. I like to share something with my customers who appreciate my cooking." "Wait, you made those pizzas?" I asked. "Yes, I did. I run this business all by myself." "And what exactly are you going to share with us?" Harry asked, hesitantly. "They say you are what you eat, so I'll make you guys into a pizza," he said, flipping a switch to turn on the overhead light. Now, you may be thinking, if he had a regular light, why did he even bother with that stupid lamp? To be honest, I don't know. The man was odd, to say the least. The only thing I can think of is that he did it for the dramatic effect. Anyway, when he turned on the light, it revealed at least a dozen naked corpses hanging on the hooks along the walls, and they each had parts missing. One girl had her head missing. The man laughed when he saw our horrified expressions. "You sick fuck," Harry cried out. "Never heard that one before. Oh, and just so you know, this is where the meat for your meat lovers pizza comes from." "Wait, so you mean that we've been eating?" "That's right, bitches, you've been eating people meat." All three of us started gagging. "Oh, come on, don't throw up. I have enough cleaning to do as it is," the man said. "And I'm guessing you are going to kill us, then make us into toppings," I asked. "Hey, you catch on quick. Now I'll give you all a couple of minutes to decide who will be first," the man said, sharpening a knife with his back turned. I looked over to see what my brothers were doing. It turned out Harry and Ted had found 2 shards of glass that the man must have forgotten to pick up, and they were trying to cut away their ropes with it. They both gave me a look, so I knew I had to be the one to distract him. The man turned, sporting a wide, toothy smile and holding a large carving knife. Then he began walking towards us. Luckily, he couldn't see what my brothers were doing from where he was. "Wait," I said, sitting up. "What is it?" he asked, with a hint of annoyance in his voice. I was just wondering how one gets to be a cannibalistic pizza maker. "Are you stalling?" "No. I just figured someone with an interesting occupation must have an interesting background." "Well, it's not like anyone will be able to find us out here. I suppose I can summarize to you guys what my life has been like." We all made sure to look at him and pretend to seem interested. See, I grew up the middle child of 4 brothers and 4 sisters. Everyone in my family had a natural cooking ability. That is, except for me. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get the hang of it. Something my family chastised me greatly for. So, when I was 16, I did the only rational thing I could think of. I drugged my entire family, cut off parts of their flesh, then baked my pizza using the meat, and let me tell you, it was a damn good pizza. I even made my family eat it, but they threw it up. I could tell they liked the taste of it though, and so did you guys. Did you kill your family? Oh, of course. And I burned all the evidence. After that, I drifted for a while, setting up my business in different places. Before I came here, I admit running things was difficult. It wasn't easy getting victims. This is until I stumbled across this deep web stuff. I must say, it's very convenient and a great way for me to run things. Now, have you decided who will be first yet? Because if not, I'll decide for you. Actually, we have, I said, feeling two sharp objects poke my palm. Who will it be then? Shards. The man gave me a confused look that quickly turned to a surprise when Harry and Ted sat up as I laid on my side. Before the man could react, they threw the shards of glass at him. One went right into his throat and the other in his face, cutting a gash right next to his eye. He staggered back, gasping as his temple and neck bled. My brothers quickly pulled off the rest of their ropes. Then, Ted charged the man, while Harry untied my ropes. Once I was free, we joined Ted in kicking the shit out of the dude. It turned into a good old-fashioned, brotherly ass-whooping. I mean, we went to town on this guy. We kicked him in the ribs for a few minutes. Then we took turns stomping on his crotch. We even did that thing where Harry got him up and held him with his arms behind his back, and Ted and I took turns gut punching him over and over until he went limp to the floor, gasping for air. As much fun as it was beating the crap out of that asshole, Harry eventually went upstairs and found a phone in the house and called the police. When they arrived, you could tell some of them were freaked out by how crazy the scene looked. A couple detectives took our statements, while some ununiformed officers wearing latex gloves started bagging evidence. 2 more officers arrested the man, noting he was lucky that one of the shards didn't go any deeper into his neck. After the detectives got all the information they needed from us, another officer then gave us a ride back to the library. You know, throughout the questioning, there was one thing we all 3 forgot to mention. We still had some of that pizza left over in Ted's car, and I know we should have turned it into the police. But, as crazy as that guy was, he was right about one thing. That pizza was damn good, and my brothers and I figured, why let good food go to waste? What the hell? What is it, honey? My wife's voice called out from behind me. It's a door. She laughed. Did you break into the pot stash early? We're in the middle of the woods. Why would there be a... Oh, huh? Karen stopped as she saw it, and we stood shoulder to shoulder looking at it. An old wooden door built into the side of a hill in the middle of nowhere. It really is crazy what you can find out on these expeditions sometimes, isn't it, honey? She grinned. Should we knock? I shook my head. I'm not really sure I want to meet the kind of person that lives inside a hill. Oh, come on. Karen punched my shoulder. Where's your sense of adventure? Karen walked up to the door and gave it a polite knock. Hello? I'm looking for a Mr. Beard. A Mr. Treebeard? I chuckled as I shook my head. Karen never let me forget the little wonderful things about her that made me fall in love with her. She turned to me in mock disappointment. I don't think anybody's home, honey, she said. Alright, come on, I said. We've got enough shrooms for now. Let's find a good place to trip. Are you kidding? God, I married the most boring man in the universe. We've got to go inside. What if someone lives there? What if somebody lives in a hill in the woods? I think the man who built his house underground in a forest will be understanding if we offer to share some of our pot with him. You assume that just because he lives in a hill, he smokes pot? I don't know, Karen. That's pretty racist. Racist? Against who? Tree people, obviously. Who else? Karen laughed and punched me in the shoulder again. I feigned being hurt, even though I loved it when she did that. Alright, I finally agreed. After all, if I didn't completely ignore common sense sometimes, I wouldn't be married to you in the first place. You're really funny. After I kick you out of the house, maybe you can live with Mr. Treebeard out here in the woods. I chuckled and tried the knob. The door was unlocked. As we pushed it open, we were greeted by a damp, mossy smell. The room inside was pitch black, but it seemed to be made entirely of rock, not dirt like I expected. Hold on a second, I said, sliding the pack off onto the ground and fumbling around inside for the flashlight. I flipped it on and scanned the walls. What the? The walls were all covered in some nonsensical carvings. It reminded me of when we studied Egyptian hieroglyphics in school. What is this? Wingdings? Karen joked. I didn't answer. I had gotten the sudden feeling that I was being watched. I swung the flashlight to the back wall, only to discover that there wasn't one. The passage continued and sloped downwards, until the flashlight beam ended on the ceiling about 30 feet away. Karen, I think we should... Hold on. What's that? Karen pointed to a dark spot on the floor, and I pointed the flashlight down to illuminate. It was some kind of black liquid. Motor oil? I joked, but Karen wasn't joking around. She knelt down to look at the puddle. It's blood, Danny, she said, and look, it's leading down inside. I tilted the flashlight up. She was right. There was a blood trail leading deeper into the cavern. It's probably just an animal, I said. We should go. But Karen was already tying her hair up the way she did at work. She cupped her hands to her mouth. Hello, she called out. I heard the call echo down the chamber, which must have been much larger than we had originally thought. Is anybody down there? Silence. But then, a barely audible call answered. Help! The call sounded like it was coming from deep within the cavern. When I heard it, all the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and there was a sinking feeling in my chest. My every instinct started telling me to get the fuck out of this place. Karen, it could be some sort of trap, I said. Let's call the park rangers and then get the fuck out of here. Somebody's hurt down there, Danny, she said sternly, but then her expression softened a bit. Sorry, honey. This is what you got yourself into when you decided to marry a nurse. I sighed. I knew there was no stopping Karen once she had set her mind to do something, but I kept a tight grip on the heavy mag flashlight as we proceeded down the passageway. The blood trail got thinner as we walked deeper into the cavern. Whoever it was must have lost most of their blood in the antechamber. But if they were hurt out there, why had they returned further into the cavern? Why not go outside where they had a chance of being found? It didn't make any sense. The air grew hotter and more humid as we went further down the increasingly steep slope, and a pungent smell of mold invaded our nostrils. I coughed as I breathed the horrid air. Where did all this dust come from? The deeper section of the cavern walls had been cracked open by tree roots that had burrowed their way through the stone. What the fuck is this place? I whispered to Karen. Maybe some sort of makeshift survival bunker, she guessed. She cupped her hands to her mouth again. Hello! Her shout echoed down the hallway. If you can hear us, Stay calm. We're gonna help you get out to safety." "Help." The voice was a little louder this time. We must be getting closer, I thought. But the sense of revulsion I felt on hearing the voice only got worse. Did she not feel it? As we went deeper inside, we found where the blood trail ended. There was a long smear of it on the ground. It looked like somebody had been dragged across the floor while bleeding heavily, and then it just stopped. Not even a drop after that. The walls of the cavern had now almost been completely overrun by roots, and breathing was getting difficult as the air had grown hotter and more choked with dust. "Help!" The voice was very close now, and I could now make it out more clearly. It sounded strange, all breathy and raspy, like a crude imitation of what a person should sound like. The floor had now become so steep, it was impossible to go any further without risking a fall into God knows what. "We've got to get down to him somehow," Karen wheezed out. She must have been having more trouble breathing in the hot, thick dust than me. "I've got it," I said. "You step back." I pulled out the length of rope we'd brought in our emergency gear and tied it to one of the thick roots, springing through the wall of the cave. I gave it a few firm tugs to make sure it was secure, before tying the other end around my waist. I'd never wanted to turn around and go home so badly, but I knew there was no way Karen would leave without seeing this through. I started to climb down carefully, leaning over and trying to move the flashlight around to try to see what was going on without slipping and falling. I could see the vague outline of a man in the darkness, and I swung the flashlight beam over him. My blood went cold. "Karen, run." "What?" "Run." My breath was knocked out as the rope yanked back against my waist. I hoped it was Karen pulling, but I knew it wasn't. She wasn't that strong. I landed on the ground hard, and the rope continued to pull me backwards. "Danny, what the fuck is?" "Run, goddammit." She started to back away as the roots on the walls all started to move, slowly snaking their way towards us. I sawed through the rope with a pocket knife and stumbled forward in a sprint, yanking Karen along with me. She wouldn't have hesitated if she had seen what I had. At the bottom of the cavern, a man had been suspended above the ground in a giant web of roots that were writhing and sliding through him. Little bulges were moving slowly up the roots that led away from his collapsed and shriveled body, one root jutting into his throat and twisting around every time he called for help. The plant was working his voice box like a puppet. We abandoned our flashlight and gear bag in the cave behind us as we sprinted towards the exit in total darkness, hacking and coughing as the moldy, dusty air of the cavern filled our lungs. I could feel myself tripping on roots that had not been there on the way in. I felt a yank on my hand as Karen fell, and we both tumbled down onto the writhing roots which circled around our limbs and began to drag us backwards. I started hacking desperately at them with my pocket knife. The roots recoiled as I struck them, and I managed to free my legs. I pulled at Karen's hands, but the roots were stronger. "Just leave me," she shouted at me. "Fuck no." I swung blindly at her legs, and the knife connected with a sick thud. I swung a dozen more times, slashing her legs once by mistake before she was loose enough to yank free. We kept running towards the door, and I could feel the air getting cooler and fresher, and the floor beginning to level out. We'd almost made it. I could see the outline of light around the door now. We ran full force into it, ricocheting off and bouncing back onto the ground. I scrambled up. "Please be open." I grabbed the knob and yanked, and a torrent of fresh air and sunlight poured into the cavern. I grabbed Karen's arm and half dragged her through the open door before collapsing exhausted on the ground. "We made it," I gasped out. My chest was heaving up and down as I lay on my back, coughing up all the dust from the cavern air. Yeah, Karen was bright red with exhaustion, her arms and legs covered in scratch marks. I don't imagine I looked much better. What the fuck was that? I said breathlessly, getting to my feet. Karen shook her head. I don't know, but let's get the fuck out of here. I helped Karen to her feet, and we both stood there panting and coughing with our hands on our knees. Karen coughed something up into her hand. Danny, she said, showing it to me. It was a small leaf. I watched her face as little green tendrils began to spread out and coil around her skin, and I realized with horror that it hadn't been dust we were breathing in. It had been spores. You don't have to be all that perceptive to notice that malls and retail sales in general have been on a slow and steady decline for quite some time now. Sears, Dillard's, JCPenney will all soon be just remnants of a long-forgotten consumerist era. Due to my considerable bad luck and lack of forward thinking, I found myself employed by one of these dying malls. I remember the day I started at the place, I accidentally parked all the way on the other side of the building and had to walk to my work location, Spencer's, which was the very last store open at that mall. My interview with the store manager was over Zoom, so this was my first time actually entering the place. I literally felt like I was going into a ghost town. There was this overgrown planter up ahead that sat in the middle of the hallway with these long wiry weeds bursting out from the center of it and covering the sides. I smirked as an old plastic bag literally rolled across the hallway like a tumbleweed from an old western movie. A wide-eyed, disheveled-looking homeless man shuffled around a corner past me, looking very stressed. He then turned and looked back as if he was searching for someone, then ambled right past me again, not even making eye contact. I stopped at the food court before my shift to grab something, wondering if there would still even be any food windows in operation. Luckily, there were two places. A hot dog and a Chinese food window were both open. Neither were my favorite, but I figured I could probably fill up on some fries at least. As I walked over to the hot dog window, I noticed someone out of the corner of my eye who immediately disturbed me. Across the rows of empty tables and chairs, there was an obese woman at a large table with two different trays in front of her. She was literally going back and forth from a Chinese platter to a hot dog, and everything down with a milkshake. Sauce was covering her face and shirt as she consumed voraciously. I'd never seen anything like it, and I didn't want to stare, but it definitely made me uncomfortable. So I grabbed my fries and headed to my store to eat them in the back room. As I walked out, I turned my back and saw her look up from her food. She stared at me blankly, but with this deranged hint of desire. Luckily, I was told before where the time clock for the store was. I walked straight to the back and found a coworker, Brandy, who was aggressively stocking items on a shelf and eventually noticed me. "You the new guy?" she asked as she grabbed one of my fries. Her studded eyebrow ring glistened as light cast across an enormous burn scar covering half of her face. She was probably in her early 30s, and you can tell by her curt personality that she'd been dealing with social ramifications of the scar for most of her life. "You hear what happened to the guy whose spot you took?" she bluntly said as she jammed some rolled up posters into a cubby. "No, what?" I asked, thinking that I should have probably realized there would have been a reason the last store in a dying mall in 2020 was hiring. Guy was convinced this mall was some secret CIA facility or something. He talked to me about it all the time. Cops eventually found him up on the rooftop with his ears chopped off, saying he was trying to make the voices go away. Dude's been in a facility ever since. Clearly shook by the disturbing story, I sat in silence for a moment. Then I awkwardly thanked her for the info and went over to the time clock to clock in. The rest of the people who came through that day seemed like different variations of Brandy, looking for piercings and raunching greeting cards to give as presents. Either way, it was a pretty standard day for that kind of place, except for one really weird thing. The manager I had met with over Zoom never showed up, so I basically just took direction from Brandy the whole time. At closing, she showed me how to shut down the register. Then we cut the lights before bringing down the gate over the front of the shop. The hallway of the mall was so dark and silent, you could probably hear a pin drop from all the way across at the other side. I painfully remembered at that moment I was going to have to cross the entire place to get to my car. "Where are you parked?" Brandy asked as she locked the metal gate. I pointed to the left down into the abyss of empty stores. "Ill man, I feel you," Brandy said as she turned to the right and gave me the hang loose gesture with her hand. I guess I sort of expected her to offer me a ride to my car, but knowing my luck, I'm not sure why I would have expected that. Anyways, I started down the empty hallway of abandoned stores. I casually looked through the windows of the different places in various states of despair. It really was surprising the way many of them were left. Some were totally stripped, but then others seemed like the owners just walked out, leaving all kinds of garbage and merchandise behind. One of them I came across was this custom doll shop with countless little eyes staring out at me from the darkness. I moved past that one very quickly. Then I came to one that looked like it had been some kind of indoor playground in the 90s. I gazed through the window and saw one of those little fiberglass castles that you'd see at the playgrounds. A tiny shadow suddenly scurried out from behind it to another area of the store. It happened so abruptly that I wasn't even sure what I had seen. The gate wasn't even locked and was sitting partially open, so I lifted it and stepped inside. "Hello?" I called out into the darkness, hearing nothing back. That's when I thought I heard a child's scared breathing. "Hello?" I called, but there was still no response. I got too freaked out to keep searching at that point, so I hightailed it under the gate and down the hall. Then the homeless man from earlier came out from around the corner and almost crashed into me. "Hey, what the hell?" I yelled at him, but like before, he just kept walking. The mall had been closed for at least a half hour, so he shouldn't have been in there, but I didn't know the number for security yet, and I wasn't going to go chase him down. I figured I would just tell the manager about it the next day and see what they said. Finally, I got to the door of the parking lot and discovered that it was pouring out. My dog hadn't been fed or walked in like 8 hours, so I didn't have time to wait. I braved the rain and eventually got to my car. When I reached down to unlock the door, I saw the shadow of the huge woman from the food court before, standing out in the rain. There were no cars around her, and she stood slightly off balance, looking completely out of it. I got into my car and started it, trying to ignore her, but when I looked up, I saw her running at incredible speeds towards me. I accelerated, hydroplaning and spinning in one place. She jumped onto the back of the car and pounded her fist onto the windshield, breaking the window. Turning the wheel back and forth, I tried desperately to shake her off, but she wouldn't budge. In a last-ditch effort, I threw a tire iron from under my seat back at her face. That finally knocked her off, sending her into some bushes off the side of the road. I called the police immediately and told them what had happened, to which they had said they would go check it out. After I arrived home, I was contacted by an officer who told me that they were not able to find the woman, but they were going to send someone to access the damage of my car. Shortly after the call, I heard the front door of my apartment open. I slowly walked out into the living room with a baseball bat. She was there, her mouth gaping wide open, her clothes torn, and her hands were clenched, ready to attack. Before she could, a bag came down over her head from behind. A man injected her with some kind of paralyzing agent. She fell to the floor and he stepped over her, another man coming in behind him. At first, I thought they were somehow with the police until I looked over at my pit bull, Doug, and saw that he was bizarrely just frozen there. They were both pale, bald, and had these piercing white eyes, and gazed at me until my hand suddenly opened, dropping the bat. One of the men approached and handed me a paper with a typed set of instructions on it. They said, "You will continue your job at the Rareview Mall until specified otherwise. You will not inform authorities about this instruction or anything else related to what you find at Rareview Mall. Failure to follow this guideline will risk serious repercussions." Below that number, there was a list of my family members and their addresses. Then lastly it said, "You will write down all supernatural occurrences that take place during your shift at the mall. If your entries are sufficient to us, you will eventually be allowed to leave as well as be compensated for your time." As soon as I was done reading, the man grabbed the paper back from me, and they both immediately walked out the door, dragging the woman's body with them. My dog then reawoke, barking and confused. That was about a week ago, and the things I had discovered since then are even more bizarre than the stuff I did the first day. I still have not been contacted by those men again, and I don't know how much longer I can keep going with this. I fear for my life on a daily basis. Although I am scared, one thing is for sure. The more time I spend at the mall, the more intrigued I become with its true nature and why I am needed here. I created this document as a way for others to keep track of me, so if I disappear at least, someone will know why. The Devil's Nightmare is created by our own minds and is born anytime someone has any amount of fear about something. Fear is like chum in the water for this entity. I believe it can smell it from miles away. It exists anywhere that life forms are and will never really be destroyed, as long as we are around, that is. At its core, I believe it is a spiritual parasite, one which attaches itself to us and feeds off our fear. That is why it manipulates its host to create as much of that as it can. It also does not need to exclusively attach to one person. It can possess many different people at once, influencing them based on their personal experiences. Its ability to spread and control people is astonishing. If somebody has any amount of anxiety about a topic, it can spread through a conversation just like that. Then once inside, it transforms its host's behavior, changing who they are. If you notice a change in someone, or see that they have become more fearful than usual, they may be being influenced by the entity. A man named Philip Carmichael was an individual I found who I felt showed obvious symptoms. He claimed that he probably harbored the being since he was just a little kid, or perhaps he was born with it. He said it used to make itself known by offering little innocuous comments to him, as if he was speaking them to himself, but was confused as to why. It would say things like, "What if this person doesn't like me?" Or, "What if they make fun of me?" These type of thoughts were crucial in helping the Devil's Nightmare grow within him. He also felt that in our time now, more than ever, it was able to grow and gain enormous influence. I believe the entity has always prospered in eras like ours. Anytime that there is a great uncertainty to feed on, like World War II or the Dark Ages, it was most likely there pulling the strings. It's always thrived in chaos because that comes with fear. The first research I came across on the entity dates back thousands of years, when members of the Catholic Church first named it the Devil's Nightmare. They told tales of it, saying it was cast out of hell because even the devil feared it, which is a testament to the true power of the being. Since then, knowledge of it has been passed down by elite members of society, often being used to further their agendas and spread their influence, while absolving them of any blame. This is because it's so difficult to tell if someone is truly infected. In fact, the only observable indicator ever documented is that if you gaze into the pupils of someone infected, you can see a slight red glimmer shining through. This is supposedly the being's eyes looking out from within the infected host. However, I've never witnessed this phenomenon myself. I've studied this entity for much of my life and never could prove its existence until I captured it on camera during a meditation session with Philip. I had taught him a series of techniques and strategies to help him release the grip fear had always had on him. I then used special recording technology to visually track and study the results. For months, I had him record his 1-hour meditation sessions before he went to bed, and at first, we didn't catch anything. That was until one night, he said he felt he had a particularly good meditation, with his focus being very strong. I later watched the recording and witnessed what I had been waiting all those years to see. A dark shadow-like figure manifested at the edge of Philip's bed and hovered there glaring at him. It appeared to be in a deep form of analysis, its body writhing back and forth. Most likely, I believe it was contemplating how to penetrate his mind once again. The pits of its eyes became redder and redder the longer it stared at him. Then after a few minutes, it just vanished again. I tried submitting this tape to various different scientific agencies, but they just claimed it was fake. Eventually, one of the agencies even set out to destroy it. It seems there are individuals who don't want the information about the being to be known. So, what can it even do? Well, as far as I know, it has the ability to do almost anything it wants, and at the same time, almost nothing. Every action it desires is performed by the one infected, and all the entity can really do is convince them to act. A woman I was interviewing at a prison told me about her encounters with the being, saying that they were eventually what landed her in jail. She had violently attacked a man who looked similar to someone who had abused her in the past, thinking that he was somehow comparable to the original man. She felt like the attack was completely orchestrated by the entity because she never would have done that otherwise. I've noticed in my findings that traumatic events do seem to give increased ability for the entity to enter someone's mind and cause havoc. She said it would tell her to do things, but used her own inner voice to say them to her, to the point where she wasn't even certain which thoughts were truly hers anymore. She believes that she is now controlled mostly by the being, and only a small portion of herself is still there. That's what seems to make the being so dangerous. The fact that you never really know. So in this case, there is really only one way you can fight it. You must accept that it could be there and acknowledge what it might be doing. You have to realize that it uses your fear to control you. Then, and only then, can its influence diminish. If you are less affected by the mechanisms it uses, then you will be less controlled by the being entirely. It never goes away though. It's something you can only hope to manage, but never completely destroy. Hopefully in the coming years, more people decide to react to the being in this way. Giving into the fear only causes it to expand further and further, until God knows what travesties it may accomplish.